Okay, so now that it is 1:05, we will get started. Allow me to just share my screen very quickly. Okay. All right. You should be able to see my screen, so we will get started. All right. So today's lesson is about loops extension. Last week we looked at loops, for loops, and while loops. This week we'll just be doing an extension to that and going into some more like advanced loop concepts that you should be able to know to be able to successfully code in Python. So just as like a little quick review, um, while loops are basically loops that runs as long as a given condition remains true, as we learned last time. And for loops are used to iterate over a sequence like a list, a range of numbers or characters in a string. This is basically basic definitions that we used last time, just reviewing loops. Does anyone have any questions on loops from last time? Because I'm just going to give you a quick couple review questions to do before we get started with today's lesson officially. Okay, if not, we will just continue on to some review questions I'd like you guys to do. So here are the review questions. Here, I'll just make them a little bigger. So for the first one, make a while loop that asks the user to input the integer 10. If the user inputs any other number, it should ask the question again. If the user inputs 10, it should stop looping and print the string correct. And then for the second one, I want you to create a for loop that outputs every number from 1 to 100 that are divisible by 3 and 2 only. This one's going to require some math skills, but I'm sure you'll be able to figure that out. I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to do that, and then I'll go over the answers and we'll continue on with today's lesson.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Last week I wasn't here and I can't understand what we're supposed to do.
That's okay. Last night I sent the video for last week, so after today's class, feel free to go check that out. I will be going over the answer to this in a minute, and I'll go into further depth on what to do for while and for loops, but I still would recommend looking at that video after today's class just to catch up.
Yeah, and I wasn't here. I missed two classes, so I don't know anything.
Oh, okay, yeah. We have the video of the third class up, like the class before last class. I can send you both last week and the week before that's classes. If you shoot Code Unity an email, I will make sure to send you both those videos.
Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Excuse me,
Yes.
I do not understand.
Okay. Like, were you here last time, or like you just don't understand like the questions, or like what part of it?
Yeah, I'm last time, but I attend half middle.
Okay, I will go over the answers in like a couple minutes once everyone has a chance to try it out. Yeah, after that, we'll continue on today's lesson, but if you missed part of the last class, I still would recommend going to watch that video fully because, yeah, this lesson will be very hard to understand if you haven't or seen or heard of last class. But either way, yeah, if you guys want like the video from last class that you don't have it already, please send us an email. We will send you the videos. Any videos you would like, we have them. So just make sure to email us on that. Okay, I will go over the answers to these questions now. So first of all, that um, a while loop that asks the user to input the integer 10. And if the user inputs any other number, it should ask the question again. If the user inputs 10, it should stop looping and print the string correct. So first of all, we will set a number just equal to 0. Here, we'll make it named num, a variable named num. We'll make it equal to 0. Then we will create a while loop while num is not equal to 10. So then after that, we will have the user input integer for num. So we'll do int input enter the number 10. And then after that, we will exit out of the loop and print a string that says correct. So basically, just to go through this, what this will do, originally it says a variable of number equal to 0. And then it starts a while loop saying while the number is not equal to 10. And when it's 0, it is not equal to 10. So it'll initiate the loop. And it'll say, like, while the number is not equal to 10, it'll ask the user to input the number. So let's say you input the number 5. All right, so let's actually just run this so I can show it to you more easily that way. Let's say we input the number 5. 5 is not 10, right? So that means this condition is still true. Therefore, it'll run through the loop again. It'll run through the loop again and ask this again. Like I said last time, if we input a number that's not 10, it'll run through the loop again because this condition is still true. However, if we input 10, suddenly this condition, number not being equal to 10, is no longer true because it does equal 10. So now that that condition is not true, it exits out of the loop and continues on with the code after the loop and prints correct. So essentially, we covered this last class, but I'll go over it again very quickly. A while loop specifically, has a condition here. And as long as this condition is met, it'll keep running this loop over and over and over again. But once this condition is no longer true, it'll exit the loop and start running the code outside of the loop. Like that is past it. So that's essentially how while loops work. For loops are slightly different, but essentially the same concept. We'll go over this question now so I can demonstrate that. Create a for loop that outputs every number from 1 to 100 that are divisible by 3 and 6 only. So like I said, this question requires a bit of math skills, but essentially the numbers 3 and the numbers 2 and 3, for it to be divisible by 2 and 3, that means it'll be divisible by 6, basically. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to set a for loop for I in range 0, 100, 6. Then print I. So what this is going to do is we have the bottom of the range, inclusive, and the top of the range that's not included. So essentially, it'll look through every number 0 to 99. It will print every 6th number. So first of all, it'll print the first number, right? 0. But then it'll print the 6th number after that because we have set this condition here as basically just like a condition of how many numbers in this range, 0 to 100, but 100 not included, so really it's 0 to 99, that it wants to look at. So we'll be doing 0, 6, 12, 18, all the multiples of 6 here, which is exactly what we want to be able to look at because all these numbers will be divisible by both 2 and 3. So now we can look here. 0, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, all the way down to 96. So that is essentially how we're able to solve that problem using a for loop. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions on that, or are we good to move on to today's lesson? All right.
So what does like the I like the I in the bracket means?
Like, oh, this I?
Yeah,
And this I. Okay.
and I don't understand the first one for in I in range, like 0, comma 100, comma 6. I don't understand that.
Okay, so basically I is a variable. Really, I could be anything. Let's say num, we can make this num. It doesn't matter what that is. I is just some variable that represents the integers that could be in this range. So it's a range of numbers basically. 0 to 100, all the numbers into there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 99, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 99. So it's going to essentially stating the 0 and the 100 here tells us that it wants num to be able to look at all of those numbers, all right? And then this 6 here tells us how many times it should increment each loop, okay? So originally num is just set at 0, okay? And then for the first run through of the loop, then it'll go up by 6. So then num is equal to 6, which we've written down here. Then it'll loop again, num will equal 12. All right, it'll print here. It'll keep going up and up and up. And eventually it'll say, okay, num is 96, as it says down here. All right, and it'll print 96. Then it'll do 96 plus 6, which is 102. However, the range we set here was from 0 to 99, which means, and since 102 is past that range, it no longer applies to this loop. And this condition here, like I said for the while loop, the condition must be true. Same thing here. This condition is no longer true. So it'll exit the loop. And since there's no more code down here, it will not keep running. Just to show you like what would happen if there was code, we'll print this, right? Just to show you that after it prints all of this and the condition is no longer met, it prints code. So does that make more sense?
Yes.
Awesome. And again, if you're still struggling with this concept a bit, if you missed last lesson, or if you want to just re-review last lesson, I would highly recommend it. The video was emailed to all you guys last night. Again, if you like somehow missed the email or don't have it, or would like a previous lesson before that, just shoot Code Unity email and I'll make sure all of you get that. But nevertheless,
I got the video, but like I didn't hear any voice in the video.
you didn't hear any voice?
Yeah, there was like when anybody was speaking.
Okay, interesting. If there was no like voice in the video, I'm gonna have to check that out. Worst case scenario, if there was a technical error, we will send you guys a new video that has audio in it. We apologize.
But I'll try the one that you just sended.
Okay, that sounds good. Awesome. But nevertheless, we will continue on with today's lesson now. So first concept we're going to look at is nested loops. Okay? So nested loops are loops placed within inside another loop. So basically this is the main concept I want you guys to like understand. The inner loop will complete all of its iterations for every single iteration of the outer loop. So I'm show you an example here where I'll explain it. So first we have a loop for I in range 3, and it'll say print outer loop iteration I, okay? And then we have another loop inside of that loop that says for j in range of 2, print inner loop iteration j. So what's going to happen is we're going to run the first loop of I, right? And it'll say print outer loop iteration, it'll say 0, right? So then it'll go through this because that's inside loop I, and say for j in range 2, print like the inner loop iteration, which will print 0. And then it'll will still be in the same I loop, and then it'll run through j again because this condition is still true. It's still less than 2. So we'll run through that again, and it'll print 1, okay, for j. Then it'll go through the I loop again and say I is 1. It'll go through j and do the j loop twice. Then it'll go through I a third time. And during that third time, it'll run the j loop twice. And then this condition is no longer true, so it'll exit that loop. And every time this runs through twice, the condition no longer becomes true, and it exits that loop, but it's still inside of this loop. It's kind of a difficult concept, but if you can understand that this loop will run through its entirety for every one iteration of this loop, you will be able to understand this concept. But however, I would recommend practicing it because it is hard. So I do want you guys to try an example problem very quickly. I'll give you 5-ish minutes to do this, but what I want you to do here, I'll make this bigger again. Okay, make a nested for loop. This is an example of a nested for loop, by the way, which prints the numbers 1 through 10 10 times. Each iteration of the outer for loop should have the number of its iteration at the top, separated by a space, then followed by the 1 through 10 iteration of the inner for loop. So, yeah, basically what I want you to do is I want you to make a nested for loop. You have one loop that should run through 10 times, and then an inner for loop that should run through 10 times, and every time it should print the number that of I or j or whatever iteration you have there. Like for example, the one we did with this, but instead of it being 3 and 2, I want you to do it with 10. So yeah, I'm giving you a lot of hints for this one, but that's mostly because it's like quite difficult, and I want you guys to be able to try it out and like try your best on this. If you can't figure it out, that's 100% okay. This is a difficult concept. I'll be going over it in like about 5 minutes to show you guys the answer. But yeah, I do want you to try it out. So yeah, take like about, actually, this is a harder one. I'll
Can
give
you
you
go on the example?
sure. I'll give you guys 8 minutes to try this though.
Can you do fourth number slide?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, just please unmute your mic because I'm on a different tab, so I won't be able to always see when you're raising your hands.
Um, can you go on like the example? I'm not sure on that.
Can you please explain it to me again?
I'm sorry, which part?
The outer loop and the inner loop.
Okay, so very quickly, I'll just go over like once again what you need to know for this. So for the outer loop, every time the outer loop runs once, it'll run the inner loop through its entirety. So the outer loop will run once, right? And then in its one time, it'll run this inner loop as many times as it can, which in this case would be 2. So run this twice, and then it'll run through the outer loop again one more time. So this will be at 2. It'll run through this twice, and then it'll go through here the third time and run this twice again. So essentially, it'll end up running this 6 times because there's 2 of these for every 3 of these, if that makes sense. Does that help at all?
A bit, but
Okay.
I'll just look at the old videos.
Okay, that'll help. Yeah. Also, I'll be going over the answers in like a minute or 2
Excuse me.
for this problem. So yeah, that'll help. Yes.
Can you explain me number 4 slide?
Explain this slide, or just keep it here.
Yeah, can you explain me?
Okay, so like I said, the main concept I want you to take from this slide is that the inner loop will complete all its iterations for every iteration of the outer loop, which is essentially what I was trying to explain with this example. So there's 2 possible iterations here, 3 possible iterations here. For every 1 iteration of this, it'll run through this twice. That's all basically all I'm saying here. This is just an example of this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. I'll give you guys about 1 or 2 more minutes to work on this problem, and then I will go over the answer.
Okay.
Can you go on the example, please?
Not yet.
All right, I'm gonna go over the answers to this problem now. So, we need to make a nested for loop which prints the numbers 1 through 10 10 times, and each iteration of the outer loop should have the number of its iteration at the top, separated by a space, then followed by the 1 through 10 iteration for the inner loop. So let's just get started on that. So we're gonna start with a for loop for I in range 1 through 11, comma 1, obviously for the amount it's iterating. And then we will say print I. Again, this doesn't have to be I, this could be num, this could be number, this could be like apple, it could be any word you want really. But anyways, then after that we will do another for loop for j in range 1, comma 11, comma 1, exact same thing. And we will say print j. So this should work, I believe, if we go through this. Okay, yeah, perfect. So we got, okay, we want it separated by a space, right? So we'll do print backslash n. This should be something that was covered in one of the very first classes. This basically just makes a new line. Nevertheless,
I can understand everything, but I can't understand the range and the print.
okay, so print basically just like outputs it. It makes it go onto your screen here. So like here, I'll just comment this out really quickly. I'll literally just write print hello. Save that. And then if we hit this, it just outputs hello. That's all that like print does. It outputs it to your terminal. That's how we can see like things actually like printing, things actually working, things actually outputting. That's basically like all print is. So that's like very basic. The range, like I explained last time, basically, so remember the bot, this is explained in our video of last class. So that's probably why you might not be able to understand it. But the first number is where I, this variable that we made, starts. Okay, this is included. So initially it's set at 1, right? And then the maximum threshold, which is not included, is 11. So basically saying I starts at the value of 1, and it must always be less than 11. And every time it goes through this loop, this for loop, the value of I increases by 1. That's basically what this range thing is. So it says I starts at 1, it must be less than 11, and it increases by 1 every time. And then when we print I, it just prints the value of it. So first it goes through, it prints 1, and then it'll go through again, it'll increase by 1, it'll print 2, right? So then for the second one, what is happening here is for every time this goes once, this will happen again its own 10 times because of the range we've set here, and it will print the value of j, which in this case 1, and then it increases by 1 and makes it 2, then 3, then 4, so far on until 10. And then it'll start back at the beginning of this loop again. I will increase by 1, making it 2. It'll print 2, and then it'll go j 1 through 10 again, so on and so forth until both I and j equal 10, and it stops the program. Does that help at all? Okay, well, like I said, if you want to go review last lesson, that would be very helpful to understand what we're talking about here. However, like if this is complicated to you right now and you don't understand it, that's okay. Just try and review the lesson. I'll be sending out homework problems soon. Please try those out. I would highly recommend doing as much practice as you can, because especially when it comes to coding, the more you practice, the better you'll understand. So I would highly recommend doing some practice on this as well. Nevertheless, though, we will continue on to the next section of our lesson, which is about break statements. So, what is a break statement in Python? In Python, the break statement is used to immediately terminate the loop when it appears. Regardless of the loop's condition, when a break statement is executed, when a break statement is present, the program jumps out of the loop and continues executing the code that follows that loop. So, if you remember in our for loops, or in our while loops, or whatever, at the end of the loop, when that condition that is placed at the top is no longer true, it exits the loop and then continues on with the code, right? But like, what if, for some reason, you wanted to exit the loop before it finished going through all of its iterations, before the condition that was set at the top is no longer true? Well, in that case, you could use a break statement to exit the loop due to a different condition. So like I said, here are some purposes of a break statement. The early exit, so it allows you to exit a loop before the loop's natural termination condition is met. And then conditional termination is often used when you want to stop a loop once a certain condition is met. So essentially, it allows you to exit the loop and stop looping through it before the condition that was initially set is no longer met. That's essentially what a break statement does. Here's an example of this. We have a while loop where while I is less than 10 to print I. And what will happen here is essentially it should, if this break statement was not here, right? If you can pretend this was not here, what it would do is it would print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And every time it would loop through, it would say I is increasing by 1, right? So that's what would happen. It would just print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. However, we have an if statement here, which I suppose you don't need to know right now because, but like for this purpose of the next example, I'll show you this example. I want you to copy this if statement. We'll be teaching you, I think, more on this. But if I is equal to 5, you should break out of the loop. So what's going to happen there is it's saying if the value of I equals 5 as it loops through this, it just wants you to break. So then what would the output would be, instead of printing 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it would print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when it hit 5, it would notice that if I is 5, and it would break. So I want you to try this problem. I'll give you 5 minutes for this until about 1:45. I want you to create a for loop that lists every even number from 1 through 10 inclusive, so including 1 and 10. However, before it outputs 6, I want you to break the loop. So after it outputs 4, I want you to break the loop. So essentially, I'm going to tell you how to do this, and I want you to copy that. I want you to run through a similar process to this, except I want you to set it up as a for loop with the range being 0 to 10, and then, or sorry, 1 to 10, and then the iteration number being 2. And then essentially saying print I, and if I ever equals 6, I want you to break. So that's what we want to do, range 0 to 10, set I equal to 2, and then say if it equals 6, break. So I'll keep this example up, and I'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. Yes, do you have a question?
Uh, what does the break means?
Okay, so like I mentioned over here, the break essentially exits the loop early. So if I equals 5, like we have set here, it's gonna break out of the loop. So instead of waiting until this condition is true, I being like greater than 10, it will just break early when I equals 5. That's essentially what the break does. It exits the for loop. That's all it does. It's basically a manual command that allows you to exit the for loop early or like whenever you would like. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome.
It works.
Okay, so I will be going over the answer to this problem now. So create a for loop that lists every even number from 1 to 10 inclusive. Actually, make this 0 to 10 as I explained in the problem. And then, however, before it outputs 6, we should break the loop. Okay, so we set for I in range 0, comma 11, because remember we want to include 10. If we had just written 10 here, it would not include 10. So now it does not include 11, but it does include 10. And then we will set it to. All right? So now we will say print I, and then we will say if I equals 6, break. Cool. Let's try running this. All right. So as you can see, there's a bit of a problem here. It prints 6 and then breaks. Remember, I wanted it to break before it outputs 6. So let's go over why this happened. First of all, the reason this happened is because I wrote the print before this if statement. So what's going to happen is it'll say, okay, it's 0, cool, it's in this range. And then it'll say 0, is it 6? No, fine. Then it'll increase to 2. 2, it's in this range, cool, prints 2. Then it'll say, is 2 equal to 6? No, okay. Then it'll make it 4. Okay, is 4 in this range? Cool, prints 4. Is 4 equal to 6? No. Then so it'll keep looping. Okay, 6. Then it'll increase to 6. Is 6 in this range? Cool. It'll print 6, and then it'll say, is 6 equal to 6? Yes, it is. And then it'll break. So it'll print 6 before it breaks. That's a problem. We wanted it to do it after. So in order to fix this, all we need to do is copy that and write it after. And what this will do is it'll check, okay, 0, is 0 equal to 6? No. So then it'll print it. Okay, 2 is in this range. Is 2 equal to 6? No. So then it'll print 2. Okay, 4 is in this range. Cool. Is 4 equal to 6? No. It'll print 4. 6, okay, is 6 in this range? Cool. Is 6 equal to this? Yes. So it'll break before it prints it. So if we run this, 0, 2, 4. That's essentially why we need to put this print statement after instead of putting it before the if statement. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Cool. I love to hear that. We shall continue on then. That's how the break statement works. Now we're going to continue on with the continue statement. So, in Python, the continue statement is used to skip the current iteration of a loop and immediately proceed to the next iteration. Unlike the break statement, which terminates the loop, so it'll like stop looping in general, the continue statement allows the loop to keep running, but it'll skip any remaining code of the current iteration and immediately go back to the top. Generally, its purpose is to bypass certain iterations of the code based on a condition. So these are a lot of big words, even like I wouldn't understand upon first read. So let's just look at an example. So here's an example of a while loop. So while I equals 0, so I equals 0. While I is less than 5, I plus equals 1. So that's just saying I equals I plus 1. So that just increases the value of I by 1. And saying if I equals 3, continue, and then print I. So what this is doing, basically, is it's looping over, like, I, right? So I here, first it's 0, okay? It'll increase I by 1 immediately. So, yeah, 0 immediately starts. 0 is less than 5, so it starts the while loop. So it'll increase 0 by 1, so now I equals 1. And if I equals 3, which it's not, right now equals 1, it'll continue. But so since it's not equal to 3, this statement is invalid and it'll print 1. Then it'll become 2. It'll check like if it equals 3, which it doesn't. And then it'll like void this if statement and then print 2. Then I equals 3, okay? If I equals 3, which it does now, continue. So what this continue will do is it'll bring it immediately back to the top of the loop. It won't print 3. It'll skip that. It'll immediately bring it back to the top, make I equal to 4, which is not equal to 3. It'll print 4, and then it'll make I equal to 5. It'll print, which is not equal to 3. It'll print 5, and then it'll check, okay, well, now I is no longer less than 5 because it equals 5 here. So it'll stop, it'll terminate the loop. So what we get is 1, 2, 4, 5 because it skipped 3. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. I'm gonna let you guys try an example now. Try your own problem. So I want you to make a while loop that prints out numbers 1 through 10, but skips 4 and 7 using continue statements. So essentially, I want you to do exactly this thing. I equals 0, while I is less than 10, I plus equals 1. But instead of doing if I equals 3 continue, I want you to do equals 4 continue, and then another if statement that says if I equals 7 continue, and then print I at the bottom. So exactly the same thing as this, but instead make this 4, copy this section, and make it equal to 7. So that way it'll say if I equals 4, it'll run back to the top, and if I equals 7, it'll also run back to the top. I'll leave this example problem up for you to look at. I'll give you guys 4 minutes to do this, and then I will like type out the answer myself. Yes, go ahead. What's your question?
Uh, I I I don't know what does I plus equals one means,
Okay.
and if one equals three one.
Okay. So for I plus equals 1, this is basically just a way of increasing I by 1. If you remember here with these increments, we did plus equals 1 here as well. But if you remember here with the for loop increments, here, I don't actually have it in the slideshow, but basically this is just increasing the value of I by 1. Initially it starts at 0. I plus equals 1 now makes I equal to 1. So every time it does that, it increases the value by 1. So first it'll be 1, then it'll be 2, then it'll be 3, then it'll be 4, then it'll be 5, as it keeps looping through this. So essentially this increases the value by 1. If this number here was 2, it would increase the value of I by 2 every time it ran this statement. Secondly, the if statement here, it's just checking if the value of I is 3. So you got to make sure you write the double equals though, because if you write a single equal, that's assigning it, like over here. However, the double equals is checking if the value of I is equal to 3, if I and 3 are the same thing. That's basically all that if statement is checking. And it's saying if that's true, then it'll do this, which is continue. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Anyways, now that we have had a few minutes to look over that, I will go over the answer to the problem. So make a while loop that prints out numbers 1 through 10 but skips 4 and 7 using continue statements. So let's do that. So we start with num equals 0, right? And then we will say, okay, while num is less than 10. All right? Then we'll say num plus equals 1. And we will say if num equals 4, continue. Then we will also write if num equals 7, continue. Then finally, here, let me just add some spaces in here to make it look cleaner.
It's
Finally, we will write print num. So let's look at this. It prints every number from 1 through 10 except 4 and 7, which is exactly our goal. It does not print 4 and it does not print 7. Because what we have here is we're saying if the value of num equals 4, it should just restart the loop and increase the value of num again. But only if it is not 4 and it is not 7, it runs through these checks first, will it print num, which is why we looked at last time. You must include that after these type of condition statements. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, cool. So then with that, we are actually done today's lesson. We have about 2 more minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions they would like to ask, feel free to do so now. Otherwise, you are free to go.
We can end up the call now.
Yes, the call is over now. Thank you all for sticking around. Please feel free to send us an email if you have any questions.